Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. I am not Kyle Walker. Kyle is floating around here somewhere. I am Karen Velez, and I am your guest host for this special episode of the Back of the Pack. I am joined by a round table of three other lovely lady runners from around the KC metro area. Kyle had an idea a while back that he wanted to do an episode focused on women's running safety. If you've seen Kyle, you know he is not a female. So he thought a group of us might be better equipped to talk about those issues. All four of us have different backgrounds and we have different experience levels in terms of running. So this should be a great conversation. I will warn those of you who are listening that we are likely to talk about issues of violence against women or female presenting individuals. So if that's something that you have difficulty with, this is your time to tune out. No hard feelings. If you are one of our male running friends and you're still listening, I encourage you to stick around. You likely have a female runner in your life. You run with females in group runs or races. And I think it's a good idea for you to understand what many of us face in terms of fears or frustrations on a daily basis. Part of what sparked this episode was the 1 year anniversary of the abduction and subsequent murder of Eliza Fletcher. Eliza was a Memphis kindergarten teacher. She was abducted while on her morning run. This was back in September of 2022, and she was found dead 3 days later. The suspect in that horror was arrested just a day after she went missing. Unfortunately, at the time of this recording, we are now 11 days into another female runner who has gone missing, this time in Australia. Samantha Murphy left her home for a run and did not return, and there has been no sign of her belongings anywhere along her planned route. A lot of time, what we see when tragedies like this occur is comments saying, why was she running by herself? Why was she running in the dark? Why was she running in that neighborhood? Why was she wearing what she was when she was running? Don't you think that's just inviting trouble? Karen, you have been running probably the longest out of anybody in this group. How do you feel when you hear comments like that after something like what's going on in Australia and what happened with Eliza Fletcher occurs?
Right. I mean, it's infuriating because running is something we do for ourselves. It's something that we do because we want to be healthy. We want to make ourselves better and be better for our families and for the people around us. And for someone to be criticizing you as if you have some ulterior motive to be lazy or, irresponsible in doing that. I really think a lot about people. I'm so thankful every day that I live where I do, because I think about if I lived in a urban setting, how would I even be able to do what I need to do for me and for my family? It's not, it should be a given that we have that right to do that. Whether we're
Jamie,
in an urban or in the country or on vacation or wherever we are, we shouldn't have to worry about being safe.
Jamie, you work around law enforcement in your day job, and as frustrating as it is to hear these things, why was she running in the dark? Why was she in that area? Is it now just inherent that that isn't something that we can take for granted? Would it be nice to say, you're right, I don't have to worry about that. I can just go and do my run and not have to worry about it. But is the reality now that no matter where you're running or what you're wearing or what time of the day you're running, that you need to be prepared to keep yourself safe?
Oh, definitely. I live in a more rural setting, and I don't worry too much about safety when I stay in my area, but when I go pretty much anywhere else, yeah, I do get more nervous. And I do feel like I have to make other choices to keep myself safe.
What steps do you take to keep yourself safe on runs, whether it's in a familiar area or it's someplace that you're running that you're not familiar with?
So one of my go-tos I have not actually been able to do recently, training for a marathon. Don't do in training what you're not going to do on race day. Excuse me. It is not a popular choice, but I do exercise my right to the Second Amendment and found a concealed carry holster, that a running belt that will actually conceal my handgun. And if I should need it, I have it on me. If I'm not able to carry that, I may have a taser. I have a flashlight taser that I bought right after the initial kidnapping and murder in Memphis. Um, Between those, with my schedule, I'm not usually able to run in a group, so I have to make other choices.
Amy, do you tend to run more in a group setting or do you run by yourself fairly frequently? And if so, are there things that you do that you feel like you are doing to keep yourself safer on those runs?
Well, before the whole incident with that lady, I used to run as long as I ran on a main, lit road by my house. Um, I felt somewhat safe and I was lit up. But ever since then, I was shook. So I make sure I run with someone. But then if I do run solo, I make sure that it's usually by my house. I don't like to do the same path twice, just in a row, just in case people see me. So I'm more comfortable with other people, but sometimes that you just can't do that.
Absolutely. Karen, you mentioned, going on vacation and then being in areas that you're not familiar with. What do you do when you are in a situation like that? You mentioned that you tend to stick to what you consider to be a safe neighborhood or you're running with groups, but what about
Right.
when you're on vacation?
Right. I mean, I love running on vacation. There are so many cool places you can go, so many adventures that you can have. It's a great part of vacationing, not to mention the fact that, as runners, we often have a training plan. And so we want to keep our fitness up and keep to that. But when you're in an area, I mean, sometimes you just really don't know if it is a safe area or not. And so one thing I do is I always make my route, like I study the map before I go out, and then I make my route on Footpath, which is an app, and then send that to my husband so he knows where I'm going to be. I kind of give him some times that, that I am expected to be back, and I don't, even if I find something super cool, I don't stray from that because I, don't want him to worry. And then I also love the app Life 360, which many of you probably use just to track to see when everybody's getting home or where they've been. But it's a great app that allows them to see in real time where you are at any given time. It also does keep track of where you've been and what time you were at a certain location and everything like that. So that definitely helps. But one time we were in South Dakota, and I mapped out a route and we kind of drove around on it ahead of time to see what it was. And I just knew it would be a bad idea. It did not seem safe. And so I have a Planet Fitness membership, and I got the Black Card membership so I can go to Planet Fitnesses throughout the country. So it allows you to do that. So that's just, I don't work for Planet Fitness or anything like that, but that's been great. So that day I just went to Planet Fitness and ran on the treadmill. It's like, you just have to be aware. And what I've heard more than anything with safety is to trust your gut. If something seems off, it probably is. And you don't have to be embarrassed. A lot of times when these women have gone missing. There'll be articles in Women's Running that talk about, so what do you do? Like, do you need to feel bad about being cautious? What if people say you're paranoid? You're not being paranoid, you're being safe. And that really helped me because I tend to be a very trusting person and I feel bad if I don't trust people. But I realize this isn't something to mess around with, you know. Another thing we've done, and we did this in our run group, is we have done, and I probably should do this more, but we've gone to like Krav Maga self-defense classes and learned the basics. Even just going to one of those classes is really beneficial because they don't just teach you moves that you can make, but like basic principles on how, like, you know, you just fight for your life. You don't ever let them take you to another location. Things like that that are basic principles that, you know, keep you the safest and keep you from, I mean, if you get shot running away, that's a lot better than somebody dragging you off to an undisclosed location. And that sounds pretty extreme, but that's a reality, you know.
Well, and I don't think it's extreme. And I think that's part of the conversation that often isn't had, you know, and I think that's why we're here, is because, you know, women need to hear, regardless of where you are running, you need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. And you need to understand what it means to defend yourself or get away. And I think the problem sometimes comes with whether it's taking self-defense courses or it's, you know, carrying a firearm or it's carrying a weapon of some sort, that there is no practice behind any of those solutions. It's one thing to go to a class and learn that class one time. It's one thing to say, okay, I carry a knife on me just in case. But, you know, are there times when you are actually practicing with that so that you are prepared in the instance that something like that happens? Jamie, you mentioned that you actually carry a firearm, you carry concealed. You know, have you gotten into the habit of practicing actually pulling that firearm out from your holster while you're running, you know, or you know, the taser, you know, that is also a flashlight, you know, is that something that you have practiced with?
Right. Yes. I found that the more you practice something, the more habit it becomes, the more comfortable you get with it. And obviously there's things that you, short of the flashlight itself, you don't actually want to have to use. But if you're not comfortable using it when your life depends on it, there's no point in having it with you because something could go wrong very easily, something that could be prevented had you been more comfortable with it. And muscle memory is a real thing. You get used to drawing a certain way while you're running, while you're standing still, while you're turning. It just happens.
Just like our running training, and that muscle memory starts to kick in at a certain point, you know, training to sort of defend yourself becomes second nature. Amy, has there been a specific time that you have been running or an instance where you felt unsafe on a run?
I mean, yeah, a couple of times when I went by myself early in the morning. And like I said, I like to be close to the house, so I don't know, if I didn't feel right though, I would just forget it, get back in the car where I parked and just go home. I just don't want to take a chance.
Was it a matter of just your surroundings at the time, or who was in your surroundings at the time that made you feel like you weren't comfortable?
I think my surroundings. I also remember one time I was running in a group, a couple of us, and well, it was a group run, but I was with a couple of people, and it wasn't in the best area. And I mean, I tried for us to move as fast as we can to get away from it, or to not go down a certain path. But fortunately, so far, I haven't had anything that really shook me up yet, personally.
Jamie, have you had any specific instances where you felt unsafe other than the rural roads that you run and being driven off the road by a truck coming by? But any other particular instances?
Yeah, it's happened a couple times. Yeah, so there have been a couple. The most recent was actually on a trail on Rock Island. Love the trail. The stray dog, of all things. And like I said before, training for a marathon, I'm not going to be carrying in the marathon. So I'm not carrying while I'm running right now on my long runs. And I had to grab a big stick and yelled a few choice words to the dog, raised the stick as if I was going to hit it, which was just a horrifying feeling for me because I'm a dog person. And thankfully, he stayed about 10 feet away from me, barking incessantly, and finally decided he was done with me, turned around and ran off. The other time I was running in the city and had somebody drive by and yell at me. Don't remember what he yelled, just the feeling that it left was not pleasant. And I've actually started sticking to side roads instead of main roads because that
And
early in the morning, side roads aren't traveled as much.
And I think there's something to be said for the fact that just as a female out there running, whether somebody has ill intentions or not, any time we are confronted in some way, we're yelled at in some way, somebody slows down while they're going past us, immediately I think our brains go to, oh no, is this it? Is this the time that I'm out running and somebody is going to try something, no, that they shouldn't? Karen, what do you think about, when you, sorry? No. Karen, what do you think about, that idea of catcalling or, people driving by and leaning out their window and yelling something, or if you're running in a downtown area, as we all have done, and had some people holler as you go by, that intimidation factor that is there. How do we, as women, get past the fear or the feeling of being intimidated and be able to continue through that and be able to continue, participating in the sport that we love, without letting them win?
Right. Well, it's funny that you should even mention this because I just had this happen on Wednesday and I was running with another woman last Wednesday. We were running through a parking lot and this guy drives up and starts yelling at us saying that we should be running on the sidewalk. And we basically just ran into the nearest store from there and just said we were just kind of a victim of road rage and we're just going to hang out here for a second. It's not exactly answering your question, but I just wanted to say, yeah, that's real. We've had even in our run groups, we've had people like try to drive. They're not trying to avoid hitting you and you have to jump up on the sidewalk. So that's a real issue probably for men and women, but as far as the disrespect, I mean, that can't, I'm not really sure. What was your question again? Like, how do you deal with that?
How do we work through that? Yeah. How do we work through it and just say, okay, it's either a fact of life now and we just have to develop a thick skin and get through it, or how do we handle being able to continue to go out there and enjoy this sport while having to deal with stuff like that on a regular basis?
Well, I do usually run with someone else now, and that just makes me feel a lot more secure. But I was a solo runner for the majority of my run life. I've been running for over 30 years. And it was hard. You want to go out there and enjoy a run, but something like that happens and you're off for the rest of the run. Sometimes you can tell it's just like teenagers being stupid, that you can kind of gauge it one way or another. But you never know what's going on with them. So I hate to say it, but it's like just having to be aware from the point where that happens, like, what was the intention here? And if the intention was to, was feeling dangerous, you got to act immediately. And I think that's the only answer. You can't just keep going on your merry way. You've got to do something about it, whether it's call somebody, take a different route, turn around and go the opposite direction, whatever that might happen to be.
Yeah. And not allow it to interrupt what it is that you're planning on doing. If we sat in fear all the time,
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't get out and we wouldn't be anywhere.
Right. That kind of thing doesn't always scare me because, like I said, sometimes it's just people being stupid. But you just, like I said, trust your gut, trust your instinct. You kind of know when it's one way or another. Is somebody drunk and they're just like totally not being rational? That's going to be a different feeling than some teenagers being, goofy.
Amy, do you think that our male counterparts in the running community, whether it's just, the guys in general or even the ones that we run with, fully understand how intimidating sometimes it is just to be a female while running?
That's a hard answer to say. It depends, I guess, on who they are. Guys are wired differently anyway, so the way that they think could be, is different than women. I think that a lot of them, though, do have empathy and appreciation even more for us because of some of the things that we have to deal with like this. But I don't have a definite answer.
Yeah. Jamie, what about you and your experience? The guys that you run with or the ones that, are in the same running groups, do you think they have an idea of what it is to do what we do?
I think they have a vague idea just because the guys that we run with are very empathetic, very understanding, always open to listening. But until you've actually dealt with it yourself, you can't really truly understand. But I think they do understand as best they could. It's very easy for them to put their loved ones in that position. How would I feel if that were my mom, my sister, my wife, my girlfriend, whoever? I think it makes it easier for them that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a message that needs to be said probably more frequently than it is, don't, to the public in general, but, to runners specifically, if this was your mom, your sister, your wife, your girlfriend, your daughter, your granddaughter that was out running by themselves, what kind of behavior would you expect from the people around them, and get them to emulate that behavior with their, other counterparts to make sure that everybody is on the same page and everybody knows, hey, this is a real thing. It's a real issue that women deal with on a daily basis when going for their runs, whether they are admitting it or not. It is an issue. I have a tendency to not be easily intimidated, but I also know that that doesn't make me immune from having something happen. And I have to be just as cautious and just as aware of my surroundings as anybody else, regardless of my level of confidence.
Yeah.
Karen, what would you say, if there were any changes that could be made, what would you like to see in the running community or our communities at large to help female runners stay safe?
Oh, that's a hard one. But I think we're already seeing some of those changes, and that's mostly just education to women. I think the people that are a threat, we're not going to be able to educate them. They're just, they're the way they are. I was actually thinking on that previous question, my mother-in-law and my mom both say to me, I worry about you when you're out running alone. They get it. They really, people who aren't even runners, they understand. I feel afraid sometimes at night to go from a store to my car, Unfortunately, we've we've just seen that this is a reality that we have to be aware of. It is uncommon, it's not like this is going to happen to all of us, but we still have to be aware. And so that educational piece, it's really helped me a lot, because I haven't, even though I've had that fear, like I've had not known what to do with it. So all those kinds of things that help us to understand that, like if you go to Women's Running magazine, you can probably find articles, things like that. Also, women educating each other. When these things have happened in our run groups, everybody's like, do you run with mace? No. Well, you should. You should have something. And what you said, Karen, like, do you practice it? Because they can turn on you with it. Oh, okay. Didn't think about that either. So many times it's just like we're naive.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think that may be a little bit more on the women's running community to help each other out and to figure out, ways to keep each other safe. In that vein, I didn't mention that at the top of the episode, but we were all members of the KC Metro She Runs This Town group. If people are not aware of what She Runs This Town is, it's a free running club for women of all paces and experience levels. And there are chapters all over the US. And it is a great place to meet other female runners, to join in organized group runs, or just meet people who you can call and say, hey, I'm going for a run. Do you want to go? So I'm not running by myself. As a matter of fact, Jamie and I met on an SRTT group run that was 45 minutes away, only to discover that we live literally around the corner from each other. So
1 mile driveway to
our
driveway.
listeners, yes, if our listeners don't have an SRTT chapter near them, or if you want additional ways to be able to run with a group or meet other runners, check with your local running store, running shoe supply stores. They often host free group runs throughout the week. It's another great way to get into a community, so you're not always running by yourself, and you may feel a little bit safer. I haven't been running nearly as long as Karen has, but I will say that I was a solo runner for the first couple of years that I was running. And, yes, I've had my fair share of run-ins with individuals who, wanted to be intimidating in some way, shape, or form. And it has definitely been easier to run with a group. But I think also having a group of people that you can talk to and get encouragement from and learn from when it comes to things like this is probably a good idea. Anybody else have anything that they want us to talk about on this subject?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of it. I think that gives everybody a good idea of where we are as women in the running sport. It's getting better, but in terms of safety, I think we could never be too cautious. And I don't think that anybody needs to feel like they're being ridiculous, or they're being, over the top, or they're being paranoid, because I'm sure none of these women who have gone out for their runs and not come home, would have been considered paranoid if they had been carrying something with them, or had decided not to go for their run that day because they just didn't have a good feeling. So
Yeah.
thank you, ladies, for joining me for this episode. This has been another episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. Your regular host, Kyle Walker, will be back in your earbuds next week. Until then, I hope you all have a fantastic run today.